Please may I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Council in the Council Chamber at Castle Hill, Winchester, and welcome especially to members of the public who have submitted questions for Council. The first item of business this evening are the minutes of the previous meetings of Council. Members, the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 23rd of February 2023 and the minutes of the annual meeting of Council held on the 17th of May 2023, which are set out on pages 7 to 20 and 21 to 28 of your agenda pack. Are these agreed as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you. The next agenda item is disclosures of interests. Are there any disclosures of interest to be made regarding the business before us tonight? Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Madam Mayor, thank you. As an appointed non-executive director of Venter Living Limited, I have to declare an interest in item 5, and with your permission, will remove myself from the chamber for that discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. Do I have any more disclosures, please? Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare a personal but not prejudicial interest as a county councillor, since there are some issues where there is county council involvement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I also would like to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest. I'm also a county councillor, and there are points that come up in this agenda that may include the county council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Warwick.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have the same declaration to make as a personal non-prejudicial interest as a county councillor. Thank you.
Appreciated. Thank you so much. Right, so the next agenda item are announcements, and members, I am very pleased to announce my next charity event. You are all invited to my Journey on the Orient Express wine tasting event at Abbey House on Saturday the 14th of October. And if you wish to come along, I must say to you that tickets are going fast, and I only have about half a dozen places left, which I'm jolly pleased about. So if you wish, please contact me to secure your tickets. What should be, I hope, a most enjoyable evening. And my next announcement this evening is to remind members of the annual Law Sunday Cathedral service and reception on the 8th of October. And in due course, my secretary will be issuing those members who have confirmed that they are attending with further details. And one more thing has just come in this evening. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Ernie Nunn passed away a few weeks ago at the age of 99, I believe, and his funeral takes place this Monday. So I think it would be nice if we just had a minute's silence. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Mr. Macebearer, may I thank you for accompanying me this evening, and thank you. Leader, do you have any announcements, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I have announcements in 3 main areas. The first relates to relations with the County Council. As you may be aware, there were discussions that have been going on for the last year or so about the prospect of a county deal. This was a proposal that effectively added a new tier of government above the county and above the unitaries in order to take on some responsibilities that currently sit with central government and access certain types of funding that wouldn't otherwise be available. These discussions have now come to an end. Central government have made it clear that any potential deal has to include both the entire county and the Solent unitaries. And the Solent authorities have made it clear that they are not interested in a partnership on that basis, so the county deal discussions are no longer progressing. There are now similar discussions going on with regard to the future of the two local enterprise partnerships, or LEPs, that cover the Hampshire area and support the development of local businesses and the local economy. Currently, districts have a representation on LEP boards. And on the Enterprise M3 LEP, which is the one that we're a part of, there's an advisory joint leaders board as well, and I'm on both the board and the joint leaders board for that. The direction of travel now appears to be that the functions of LEPs are going to be absorbed into upper tier councils, and plans for business representation or district representation are unclear. And I think all of us on both sides, all sides of the chamber, would support the idea that districts, obviously businesses, but districts have an important role to play in the development of business in our region. And I continue to advocate to ensure that we are represented. The second topic I'd like to talk about is policing. So last week I was invited to an in-person briefing from the Chief Constable and Police and Crime Commissioner about a new, more localised structure for policing in the Winchester district, and had a chance to meet and talk with the officers responsible for our area. As some of you may know, Chief Inspector Corinne Bishop has been appointed as the Winchester District Commander, replacing John Turton. Chief Inspector Bishop was previously responsible for rural crime across Hampshire, and so brings deep expertise to the issues we face in our rural areas. And I also had the chance to discuss with her some of the issues that we have in our city and across the district. The bigger change is that many of the other policing functions that were formerly organised on a more county-wide basis will now be organised on a more local level through the appointment of a Northern Area Commander. Well, there's several area commanders, but our one is the Northern Area Commander, Chief Superintendent Paul Southey. There will also be more locally based investigators and other resources available to tackle local crime that were previously centralised. As part of the move towards more local policing, I've been told that we should also have a named police officer for every beat. I asked the Chief Constable how cross-district issues such as policing in Waterlooville would be handled. Could a Winchester resident who went to Waterlooville Police Station to report a crime be confident that the right information would go back to the Winchester District team, and was provided a degree of reassurance that this was in hand? I also spoke briefly with Chief Inspector Habib Rahman, who is the Havant and East Hampshire District Commander, about how cross-border incidents could be handled and how forces from Waterlooville could be deployed in the Winchester District in the west of Waterlooville or Denmead or similar areas when needed. The third area relates to nutrient neutrality. And of course, this is a major priority for our area. As members know, we've had some political drama with the proposed government requirement that, and I quote the clause that caused so much trouble, when making the relevant decision, in this case a planning decision, the competent authority, i.e. us, must assume that nutrients in urban wastewater will not adversely affect the relevant site. And this was thrown out in the House of Lords. And because the amendment was introduced in the House of Lords, it can't come back during the current session and can't be in the final version of the Levelling Up Bill. So prior to this particular drama, we had been pursuing a solution via various routes. Our primary route is our joint work with other councils through the Partnership for South Hampshire. And we've been very grateful for the work that Simon Kennedy has been doing with our team at Winchester to help scope market-based solutions to the nutrient problem in our area. I know from talking to local businesses, not just construction companies, but also architects and other construction-related businesses about the damaging impact that the nutrient neutrality ruling has been having on them, and it is an important problem that needs to be addressed. But I've also discussed the problem with a representative of the local environmental farmers group, who are actively pursuing how farming can play a role in delivering environmental goods and services. And this is also an area which some of the nature charities have been investigating, such as the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. I went with planning officers also to a meeting with the senior leadership from the Environment Agency in Winnell Moors, along with other stakeholders such as the Partnership for South Hampshire, Hampshire of Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust and Natural England as part of a stakeholder group on these issues, where we shared the work that we've been doing and the concerns that we've heard. I've also been in touch with Steve Bryan MP about the issue, discussing with him what is the most constructive thing that we can do as a City Council to help find a better way forward. The challenge that we now face is a lot of the careful work that has been done, as well as the emerging markets in ecological services and products that local government was helping to create, have been damaged by the proposals from central government. There's been a loss of confidence that the market can be changed at central government diktat, which is meaning that potential markets in phosphates and nitrates, but also in the future in things like biodiversity net gain, become a harder investment decision for some people. So it's created huge uncertainty about the way forward without an associated guarantee and clarity of plan as to how our rivers would be improved. It's our strong belief that any way forward has to include local government in the discussion and has to build on the work that has been done to date and not try and create a brand new system entirely from scratch. The challenge we have is to do two things, and I'm sure we share both of them as an absolute priority. One is improving the quality of water in our rivers is not optional. We are lucky to be the guardians of some of the most important and special habitats certainly in the United Kingdom, but possibly in the world with our chalk streams. But also the Solent has been, if you've seen images of the sort of algae mats and things floating in the Solent, the need to improve that is urgent and important. But secondly, and this is also something I know is very important to colleagues, we need to build the housing that we need, particularly the affordable housing that people in our area need. So we're absolutely committed to both of those objectives. Last night at the Business and Housing Committee, members discussed a way that this council can take action that will enable us to do both things. Officers and my cabinet colleague, Councillor Westwood, outlined how we have worked with Partnership for South Hampshire to scope a programme to improve our own wastewater treatment plants, to cut phosphates and nitrates in the Itchen and in the Solent, that will also unblock our plans for building more of the social housing that our area desperately needs. It will also generate more phosphorus credits than we actually need that have the potential to unblock development for other developers too, although that is, to a degree, dependent on getting a bit more clarity on the future policy environment. There was an opportunity at one point to get a government grant. There was a programme in place which could potentially have paid for those upgrades. But again, that is something that, as a consequence of the recent political announcements, has become very unclear. So that we have concluded that even if there is confusion action, there can't be locally, and it's time for us to take action on our own account. So, members, I'm pleased to tell you that following the positive reception of the proposed plans at Business and Housing, that the Council is going ahead with the first of the two of these plants identified for improvement. The orders have been placed for new equipment with the goal of completing the work by the end of the year. We will be cutting pollution in our rivers, and we will be taking a powerful first step in unlocking house building in our area. And we will be doing this in a way that will generate the evidence base for other areas to follow our example and justify further funding of the programme. On a day when some are unsure whether they want to slow things down, here in Winchester, we are going greener faster. And once again demonstrating, and this is probably something we all agree with, that when you want to get something done, it's local government, district councils in particular, that can make it happen, even when central government can't. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Exec, do you have any announcements, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members. I have apologies tonight, Madam Mayor, from a number of members. Apologies have been received from Councillors Batho, Becker, Kern and Miller, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next agenda item is item 4, questions from members of the public. And welcome once again, or a warm welcome to members of the public who are here this evening and who have submitted questions for Council to answer. I understand that we have received 2 questions for this evening's meeting, and all members have a copy of the questions received, which have also been circulated electronically. So please, may I now call upon Parish Councillor Steve Delmege, and please could you address the meeting using the microphone, sir? And a reminder that following the response given by the Cabinet member, you may also ask a supplementary question which must arise directly out of the original question or the reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening. I'd like to ask, could you explain how the Winchester District SIL fund allocation process works and how it takes into account the small rural parishes that, because of minimal development, actually receive minimal direct SIL funding?
Thank you very much. Councillor Porter, could you respond, please?
Thank you very much. Councillor Delmege, it's a pleasure to meet you. Winchester City Council encourages applications for funding from our Community Infrastructure Levy Fund. We invite applications from community organisations to fund projects where the impact of development in their area can be demonstrated, and proposals will support or mitigate that impact. Full details are on our website, and I know that your parish has applied. The annual SIL bidding process invites bids from all community organisations and parish councils outside the South Downs National Park, because they have their own SIL fund and spending, collection and spending. The collection and spending of SIL is regulated by the Planning Act 2008, section 216, brackets 2, and the Community Infrastructure Levy Amendment England number 2, regulations 2019, and that's in your written response as well. The City Council has an agreed spending protocol for SIL funding based on the relevant regulations, but also the decision is also based on our own council plan. The primary purpose of SIL is to fund new or improved infrastructure to either support or mitigate the effect of new development. SIL shouldn't be used to remedy pre-existing deficiencies unless made more severe by development. So in areas where there's been minimal development, any bid must demonstrate why there is a need for SIL funding for infrastructure to be allocated by the City Council. This can either be because an area with minimum development is directly impacted by an adjoining parish where development has occurred, or because a particular project would be of much wider benefit. Both of these possibilities are explored when the SIL funding bids are considered at the board meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Delmege, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please, thank you. So do you use a very specific decision-making process when you have disparate applications and with perhaps limited funds, if I assume the funds are limited, that you have to weigh up 2 very different applications? Do you have a very formal process that you manage that with? And if you do, could we have a copy?
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Yes, we do. We have a board that meets, it includes 2 cabinet members and some officers and the monitoring officer to check that we are following the full legal process. We're aware of the council plan as well as the legal rules for using the money, and we examine each one in particular and look at the detail and how it can contribute to the council plan and how it contributes to the need for infrastructure in that area following development. Those meetings are held sometime after the administration of the grant process to make sure that the officer concerned has the opportunity to question if they need to at any time. And I do know that some communication was held with Durley before the meeting, And I do know as well that you have been invited to rethink your application and to bring it forward again. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Porter and Councillor Demege, for your question. Please may I remind you that your question and the answer will be published on the Council's website in due course. And Councillor Demege, you are of course very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, and you are invited to be seated in the public gallery once all the questions have been heard, and an officer will assist you. Thank you. Now may I please call upon Mr. Ian Tate. Mr. Tate, please could you address the meeting using the microphone? And a reminder that following the response given by the Cabinet member, you may also ask a supplementary question which must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. Thank you, Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is addressed to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change, that's Councillor Lerney. And the question is, which stakeholders did the Council engage with before they formulated the revised parking charges? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lerney, please.
Thank you. The Cabinet Member for Climate Change, that's myself, and officers attended the March meeting of the Winchester and District Business Strategy Group, as we were advised that this was the best meeting to attend by bid to get the full representation from the bid, Chamber of Commerce and other business groups across Winchester. The proposed changes were presented and the presentation was made available for wider circulation. This included details on evening, overnight charges to be introduced in July. We also engaged with Hampshire County Council and through the formal legal advertising and Council's decision-making processes. Following these, we have continued to engage with the bid team and businesses and charities who have contacted us to support them to understand how the changes affect them.
Thank you. Mr. Tate, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, if I may. In view of the angst and to some extent negative publicity that has been induced by the changes, does the Cabinet Member feel that the consultation was effective? And did the Cabinet Member actually take on board some of the comments made by the various stakeholders, some of which you've mentioned, but many of which you haven't? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lerney, if you'd like to respond.
In retrospect, clearly we should have pressed for wider circulation of the presentation amongst our businesses in Winchester. But I'm pleased to say that although it is early days, both footfall figures made available to the City Council via the bid and our own parking statistics are showing positive signs with regard to both the use of our park and walk and park and ride car parks and the numbers accessing the city centre. Today we've once again seen that congestion is the real killer of trade in our town, and I think that is one of the things that we all should recognise rather than obsessing constantly about details of parking charges. We have been in discussion with individual businesses who've expressed concern about the impacts in their particular sectors, and we will be bringing a paper for decision on October the 9th, where we'll report back on consultation that we've held with those groups. So we continue to listen, we continue to learn from experience, we will continue to monitor both footfall and the use of our car parks, and going forward we will adjust our parking system appropriately.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. And Mr. Tate, thank you for your question. And please may I remind you that your question and the answer will be published on the Council's website in due course. And Mr. Tate, as you know, you are very welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, and you're invited to be seated in the public gallery once all the questions have been heard. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 5 in regarding establishing a local housing company. Mrs. Evans, would you please introduce? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 5 is report reference CL168 and is regarding establishing a local housing company. And this is included in your agenda pack on pages 31 to pages 55. Members, following its consideration by the Cabinet Committee Housing on the 10th of July 2023, the draft financial business plan and appointment of auditors are recommended for approval. Subject to Council's approval, it is now also recommended that Council agree to reduce the share capital of Venter Living Limited to £150,000, reflecting the equity required by the business plan. Therefore, to confirm, members should refer to the recommendations in report CL168 this evening. These encompass those originally set out in the recommended minute of the Cabinet Committee Housing. The Cabinet Committee referred to the details of the proposals set out in report CAB 3406H. And to assist Council this evening, this report and its appendices are included at Appendix B to report CL168, found on pages 37 to pages 55 of your agenda pack. Included at Appendix A on pages 35 to 36 is an extract of the minutes of that committee. And Madam Mayor, Appendix C to the report CL168 are the exempt appendices accompanying the report, CAB CAB 3406H. These are available for members to view on pages 77 to 88 of your agenda pack. Please may I remind the meeting that should Council wish to consider these appendices in detail, the meeting will firstly need to resolve to go into exempt session. To conclude, the recommendations for Council to consider this evening are set out in report CL168, and these are also included on page 2 of your agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans. Councillor Westwood, would you move the recommendations in report CL168, please? And do I have a seconder?
I move the recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler, the seconder, thank you. And reserve, thank you. Any questions? A reminder that Appendix C to report CL168 are the exempt appendices to report CAB 3406H, and if members have any questions on these, Council will need to firstly move into exempt session. But please, can I therefore suggest that we consider any matters regarding the exempt appendices after we have dealt with all the open parts of the report? Thank you.
May I introduce the report, Madam Mayor? Thank you. Thank you. This report is brought to the Council in its role as shareholder of its wholly owned company, Venter Living Limited. The shareholder agreement between Venter Living and the Council reserves certain matters for this Council to decide. Although Venter Living is now registered, it cannot operate unless the Council has agreed its annual business plan. Thus, Council is asked to consider the business plan proposed by the company. You will note that the Cabinet Committee Housing is recommending to Council to agree the business plan proposed by Venter Living, with an illustrative business model based on leasing 41 new flats in Winnell. The business model requires equity investment from the Council of £150,000. In addition, the Council is asked to agree the auditors for the company for its first trading year. Whilst that is the technical nature of the decision that is put before Council, we should not forget the reasons why we're being asked to consider the business plan for Venter Living Limited. Firstly, we are close to completing the construction of 41 highly energy efficient homes at Winnell as part of our Homes for All priority. Members will be aware that in consultation with the Winnell community, it was agreed that the development of these homes would be for a market rented product which would promote diversification of tenure at Winnell, which would prevent an over-concentration of homes for social rent. The Council Housing Company Venter Living offers many additional benefits to both tenants and the HRA. These include an innovative approach that enables homes to be offered to a vehicle that has the freedom to deliver to a broader market than the Council can through its current housing stock. The ability to offer a product that complements the Council's other housing offers and addresses this gap in the local housing market. Importantly, it offers tenants far greater security as the housing company, as the landlord, will have a long-term commitment to renting homes to the community. Tenants will benefit from living in well-designed, energy-efficient homes, high-quality property management and maintenance services provided by the Council's own landlord team, as well as the security of democratically accountable governance arrangements. And finally, providing an opportunity for residents to live and work, live closer to, in proximity to their job, and work closer in proximity to their jobs and services, thereby reducing the need to travel. As set out in the report to Cabinet Committee, the model that is proposed, whereby the homes are leased to Venter Living from the Council's housing revenue account and with maintenance services provided by the Council's own landlord team, is more favourable to the HRA over a 30-year business plan. So in summary, this product provides 41 new high-quality homes in the private rented market in Winchester, provides a better financial return for the Council's housing revenue account, and delivers homes for all. I commend the proposal to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood, and my apologies for jumping in the way I did. Sorry. So, councillors, questions, please. And as I said before, I suggest that we consider any matters regarding the exempt appendices after we have dealt with all the open parts of the report. Thank you. So, questions? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of points, if I may, to the Cabinet Member. Moving forward, the housing company, if I'm reading this right, is there to have sufficient flexibility in taking different homes 10 years forward, if I'm right. In that respect, quite a lot of our tenants across the district take comfort that they are city council tenants. They may not quite understand the concept of this housing company and what's behind it. They could have suspicions. So moving forward, what's the reassurance that we've got the communication right? Because obviously there's reflection on the 30-year business with the HRA and some of the commitment that City Council's got on a yearly basis with a new company, but how are we going to get that across to the district residents and how they even can feel that this is something which is going to benefit them moving forward in the different offer of 10 years that we're going to offer through this housing company? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Scott. Very good question, and thank you for your kind words as well about the creation of this company. The way to communicate is through our TACT team. And so there is a whole communication process with our residents through, as you well know, TACT. There are, I think we're all well aware of TACT, and I think we're all well aware that there is more that we can do than the TACT representation at the moment. And part of our work plan going forwards over the next several months is to expand the reach of TACT into more communities across our district, and in geographical areas, socio-democratic areas, and so on. Those discussions have been had with the current members of TACT. They are well aware of the need to expand further, and I've sat down and spoken to them at length about this. And I am attending the TACT AGM tomorrow, where we will be discussing that very subject. So I hope that gives you reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Councillor Horrell, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to address Council. And thank you to Councillor Westwood. He and I have discussed this important project at some length. And the development of the Winnell Flats, Madam Mayor, was started many years ago. I think I was even the portfolio holder for housing at the time. And the development was of the new accommodation was very much supported by the tenants in the area, because we had promised open space improvements to the blocks where they particularly lived, and also that the accommodation, as Councillor Westwood has said, would offer different tenures than we currently were able to. And we decided at that time that a formation of a housing company was indeed the preferred vehicle to provide those alternative tenancies. Now, the housing company at that time was conceived in a different format than the structure being suggested today. And Councillor Westwood knows that I have some concerns about the governance of that current housing company, but obviously will support the proposal this evening, because we made that commitment to constituents in Winnell many years ago, and I would like to seek his reassurance that the responsibility of this council, which we currently have, to review the progress of the company will be assured, so that we can monitor its success and the delivery of what we all intended originally. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for your question. And I will give you that assurance. As I said in my presentation and introduction, that the annual business plan for Venter Living will need approval of this council on an annual basis, and the performance of that company will be scrutinised prior to giving the following year's approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Any more questions, councillors? No? Then I will move into debate, please. Anyone for debate? Thank you. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It would be remiss of me not to say a big thank you and congratulations on this paper and this housing company. The Winnell Flats are in my ward in St Bartholomew. One-bedroom flats of the nature that the Winnell Flats are in huge demand and will make a big, big difference to a lot of people's lives. So I congratulate the Cabinet Member and the Council.
Thank you so much. Any more for debate? Councillor Horrell? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just to reconfirm this council's commitment to the 1,000 new homes that we have all, on all sides of the chamber, supported for some considerable time since the new homes team was set up. And obviously, projects like this help to contribute to those new residences that we're able to make available throughout the district. And I hope that we will continue to look innovatively at the ways that we can produce those new homes as we go forward over the coming years and maintain that commitment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Communities, families change over the course of time, and different options that we need in our district is very welcome when we move forward. I remember a number of years ago, we were discussing the birth of a housing company. So this has been around for a number of years in debate and discussions in cabinet housing. And never thought actually you would ever see, sometimes when you get these ideas, I never see the light of day, to be honest. So actually we're here. Something like we were near to a number of years ago when we started building houses, because we never thought we could ever do that again as council. And we've actually then managed to build a phenomenal amount of houses. And if I look around my ward in Stanwell, with some real smiley faces residents in the valley, and the other scheme, New Queen's Gate scheme, even though it was a loss of a pub, but we made 21 new homes there on that site, and the residents were really, really welcoming. I think we've learnt over the years, especially in some of the old traditional council estates, that we've had impact which was not of our dealing. We've had HMO impacts and stuff like that, and it's sort of like, it feels as if it's done to our estates rather than actually planned through. I think some moving along with our new homes programme is obviously vital for the affordability and social renting of families who can never probably feel as if they could ever go on the housing market themselves. But having this other venture now that we're birthing and we're deciding on as a council is absolutely fantastic. Things like key workers can actually now be really close to, you know, the hospital, the prison, the police, can all feel as if they actually can move within our district and be homed within our district and not having to do big mile commute in and so forth like that. So different facets that this housing company can bring over a number of years could be absolutely welcomed and actually fantastic. We finally, like we did a number of years ago, said, yes, we can build houses again. And yes, now we can actually offer different houses across the district. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. If I have no more questions, I will ask Councillor Cutler if he would like to speak as seconder. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very, very brief.
So sorry. I'm so sorry. Councillor Power, I've just been...
All right.
Sorry, I apologise. Councillor Power. You've caught me. Thank you so much. Mrs. Evans, could you just guide me on that one, please?
Yes, with pleasure, Madam Mayor. A resolution will need to be passed that the public be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of this exempt item of business, because the reason behind that, it is likely that if members of the public were present, there would be disclosure to them of the exempt information that is defined under Section 100, Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act by virtue of paragraph 3, which would be and is likely to be information relating to the financial or business affairs of the authority. So we need a councillor to resolve to do that, to go into exempt session, and then a seconder to also agree. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder, Councillor Power? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lurney. We now go into, am I correct, Mrs. Evans, to exempt and ask members of the public?
Yes, that's absolutely right,
you.
Madam Mayor. We will be going into exempt, but we firstly have to politely ask any members of the public if they could leave the council chamber.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just
ladies and gentlemen. We will now resume. And I will ask Councillor Cutler if he would like to have a word. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very, very brief. I mean, the principle of setting up a housing company to manage housing of different tenures and levels of rent has long been established, as Councillor Horrell pointed out. After several years of refining the process, we're now at the stage of having a business model that's fit for the purpose we require from it. And the startup capital being somewhat less than the previous iterations, I, as Cabinet Member for Finance, am quite confident that we now have the model that minimises our risks and at the same time allows us to provide the required variety of housing that we need. So I commend the recommendations to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Westwood, do you wish to sum up, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a great leap forward for the council. It does, as Councillor Cutler has said, give us alternative routes forward. I love the words from Councillor Scott as well, summing up from a position of living in the council areas, and brings his real own personal life into that story. So I think this is it's been a good reaction from the councillors here. I'm pleased that it was received well by the council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We shall now turn to the recommendations for council in report CL 168 and on page 2 of the agenda pack. Members, there has been a slight change to procedure. To assist with efficiently running the meeting, we are only asking those who are not in support of the recommendations or those who are wishing to abstain from voting to raise their hands.
Madam Mayor, if I can just make it clear that we will be asking, we need to do it separately because obviously voting, not being in support and abstaining are two different votes. So we will be asking those who are not in support of the recommendation, we'll do that one first. And then those who are wishing to abstain, and we'll record that. Thank you.
Mrs. Evans, I didn't quite hear what you said, to be honest with you. Who's first, please?
So if we would take those that are not in support first, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Godfrey, did you wish to address the council?
A point of clarification from your good self, please, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure how you can vote without voting. I think a positive affirmation of a decision would seem to be a requirement of voting. How is that not required?
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Let me just check for you because I've got to be honest with you, I'm a little bit fuzzy with that as well, sir. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, may I assist? Shall we just revert to everything that we're familiar with for this very important matter before Council this evening? So, Madam Mayor, would you like to put Councillor Cutler has had an opportunity to reserve his right to speak. I believe Councillor Westwood has an opportunity just to sum up if he wishes, and then we'll ask if Council agree the matter, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Well, we've done that. Thank you so much. So I'm going to put it to the vote, like we used to, the old way. All those in favour of the recommendation, please. Thank you so much. I think you're quite correct. Thank you. It didn't look like it, but I will ask. Any members against? Any members abstain? No? Mr Blakemore, so... Thank you. So the recommendations for council in report CL 168 are agreed. Thank you so much. So, members, I'm now moving on to item of business this evening as agenda item 6, consideration. Oh yes, Councillor Pett, could he come back, please? Thank you so much. Members, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 6, consideration and determination of the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee held the 3rd of July 2023. Mrs Evans, would you please introduce?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 6 is the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee held on the 3rd of July 2023. And this is set out on your agenda and also on page 57 of your agenda pack as part of an extract of the draft minute of that meeting. Report SC 89 refers, and this is also included in your agenda pack on pages 59 to 75. The report's recommendation is for Council to note the annual scrutiny report of 2022 to 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Evans. Councillor Brooke, would you move the recommendation and report SC 89 and the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee, please? And do you have a seconder?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do you wish to reserve your right to speak, Councillor Hall?
I do, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The draft annual scrutiny report was agreed at the scrutiny meeting on the 3rd of July 2023. Scrutiny is an essential part of the running of the council to ensure that it remains transparent, accountable and open. It's also a great opportunity for the public to come along and speak and have their voices heard on policies and papers, and also hear some of their questions answered. The result of scrutiny is that there is an improved public policies and services. I was disappointed that on the 13th of September, the scrutiny minutes were not included as part of the Cabinet decision. However, I'd like to thank Mrs Taylor for her assurance that this won't happen again. Scrutiny is not a decision-making body, but is there to contribute to the decision-making process, and therefore it's essential that these aren't forgotten in future. We have 3 committees of scrutiny, these being the Business and Housing Policy Committee, the Health and Environment Committee, and the Scrutiny Committee as the parent committee to both of these. It has been my pleasure to be chair of the Scrutiny Committee over the past few years. In September 2022, those who attended could never forget the joint meeting with the Local Plan Advisory Group. This 11-hour meeting was particularly challenging for all, but was essential for challenging the policies within the Reg 18. I'd like to thank the public, the external guests and the officers, in particular Mr Watson, for the engagement throughout, for keeping us on track and for making scrutiny as useful as it is throughout the previous municipal year, and I commend this minute to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Reach, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the administration spokesman on the Scrutiny Committee, thank you, Councillor, I'd just like to thank Councillor Brooke for her even-handed chairing of the committee. It's a committee which is extremely important. And I would just like to offer, reaching out across any kind of party divide that there may be, a meeting to discuss how we could better hold the administration to account in the spirit of good governance and transparency. So I would just like to make that offer now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? I see no hands, so I'm going into debate. Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would also like to thank the Scrutiny Committee, the Performance Panel and the Policy Committees for all their work that they've done in order to improve decision making at the start of the process and to hold us to account during the process and after the process. And like Councillor Brooke, I would like to pay particular credit to the members of the Scrutiny Committee who pulled long hours scrutinising the Reg 18 proposal and also the decision on the development partner for Central Winchester Regeneration. And I'd go a bit further in thanking them for their work because it's not just the work they do in the meeting, but sometimes just the knowledge that they're there helps us make better decisions during the process and think a bit harder about what we're doing and how we need to explain it to people and the basis for what we are deciding to do. So I would like to thank the chairs of the three committees and all the people who took part for the work that they've done because they definitely helped this council function more effectively.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. Any more for debate, ladies and gentlemen? If not, Councillor Horrell, would you like to come in now? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And just a few short comments, really. I think we all understand how crucial it is for us as a council to pay attention to our scrutiny process. We've seen other councils in the recent times get themselves into trouble, and I sit and question just how well they were scrutinising their activities and behaviours. I thank Councillor Brooke for her good-natured and very level-handed chairing of the Scrutiny Committee, and indeed to the policy committees that actually feed in to the discussions that we all have as a council. I think we're better for it, and I commend the annual scrutiny report to members this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Brooke, would you like to sum up?
I'd like to thank everybody that said thank you.
Well done. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, is the recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee as set out in the agenda and on page 2 of the agenda pack agreed? We'll do it the normal way, I think. Those in favour? I will ask, though, just in case. Anyone against? To abstain? No. Thank you so much. Thank you. The recommended minute of the Scrutiny Committee is agreed. Thank you. So the next item of business this evening is agenda item 7, which is for the council to consider notices of motion. We have 2 motions this evening, I believe. And the agenda sets out the first of this evening's motions, which is to be moved by Councillor Lerney. Councillor Lerney, do you have a seconder for your motion, please?
Yes, you do. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Lee, do you wish to reserve your right to speak?
No.
Councillor Lerney, would you present your motion, please? And may I remind you, you have a maximum of 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. human actions and the resulting climate change, pollution and urbanisation have driven sweeping changes to natural processes which affect us all. This is not only seen in the fires, floods and drought which are causing misery to millions of people this year, but in the impact on our wildlife and nature. We know how being in natural spaces generates positive emotions, calmness, joy and creativity, and improves mental health. And this is particularly important for those in deprived communities. Everyday opportunities for all our residents to connect with nature are essential, not just the opportunity to visit a remote natural park somewhere distant. However, we are in the middle of a crisis for nature, with the abundance and distribution of species declining across the UK. 15% of species assessed are threatened with disappearing from our shores. As a district council, we have a good record in this area, a strong natural environment team, a biodiversity action plan delivering action to halt loss of habitat, recreate and enhance habitat, and help species and habitats adapt to climate change. We manage nature conservation sites, including sites of special scientific interest and nature reserves, manage cemeteries, open spaces, recreation grounds, and some of our road virtues for nature conservation, and take opportunities to provide bird and bat boxes as part of our housing work. We have agreed biodiversity net gain advice for developers, and the new local plan in process proposes strong policies protecting and enhancing biodiversity and the natural environment in the district, covering green and blue infrastructure, biodiversity, special trees, important hedgerows and ancient woodlands, and water quality. In 2020, this council agreed the policy aim to protect our rivers from pollution. We will make no significant change to the rate of biodiversity loss without tackling the climate emergency, and that must remain this council's overarching priority, but we can do more. The declaration of a nature emergency will demonstrate this council's concern for the state of our natural environment and our intention to play as full a part as we can with our limited resources in nature's recovery. In the spirit of keeping this speech shorter than what is, I know, a very long motion, I won't go through all the words. You can read them in front of you. But in summary, this motion reaffirms and strengthens the Council's existing policies and intentions with updates in line with recent decisions, including the allocation of responsibility for the local nature recovery strategy to the County Council. Importantly, it recognises that, as we do with the climate crisis, we need councillors and our officers to consider the impact of all our policies and decisions made on the natural environment. This is a topic of great interest and concern to our residents, and I hope that members will feel able to support it. So, Madam Mayor, I move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Looney. The Council now has up to 20 minutes to debate the motion, ladies and gentlemen.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Lee was asked if he wanted to reserve his right to speak as seconder. He stated that he did not wish to reserve his right to speak, so it's his opportunity to speak prior to debate. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, did you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to second Councillor Looney's motion, having first raised the need for a declaration of a nature emergency in my draft motion for the full council in July 2023. Whilst the motion is perhaps a little too dilute for very rapid, comprehensive and urgent action, it does support and allow us as a council to contribute to building a future in a more nature protective, enhancing and focused way for people, our communities and nature. Time is now of the essence, as Councillor News said, to protect and restore our nature. If our natural ecosystems collapse, we pose existential risks to ourselves. Wildlife populations are declining rapidly, as stated in a major report by the conservation group WWF. The report says the catastrophic decline shows no sign of slowing. We can play our part to slow the decline. Therefore, the recognition of a nature emergency is much needed, especially as it critically also plays a significant role in tackling the climate crisis and delivery of our carbon neutrality action plan. The motion recognises that nature and the climate crises are inextricably interlinked and interdependent. We cannot deliver actions on one without considering the other. Otherwise, there is a danger of unexpected or unintentional consequences. With an eye to the future, we must therefore not be complacent about protecting and enhancing the multiple natural ecosystem services we depend on. Rightly, the motion's 9 resolutions are key in this respect. The importance of nature-based solutions is well made. But at some stage, we must also consider more fully our procurement, including supply chains and our contractual arrangements, and also help our district businesses to do more to protect and enhance nature. The management of our council services and buildings and land as well. No doubt we will look at these aspects in the very near future. This motion will also help the People's Plan for Nature, which is developed from a recent People's Assembly. The People's Plans for Nature is now a UK-wide initiative powered by the National Trust, the RSPB, and WWF UK. It is a unique collaboration with the public to protect and restore nature in the UK. Finally, the difficult parliamentary legislation, which has been referred to already, but the business processes with respect to that for bill making have blocked time for the Climate and Ecology Bill to address the full extent of the climate and nature crisis in line with the most up-to-date science. I'm sure a future government will revisit the bill with its need for better coherency in managing both crises. The Council is not only doing the right thing by adopting this motion, it is helping to position itself for the inevitability of this type of future bill with better joined-up actions for society and nature for the future. Madam Mayor, I fully support this motion, and I'm delighted to second it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. Do I have any more debate on the motion, please? Councillor Bolton, I'll take you first, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome Councillor Lerner's motion and I'm very happy to support it. I don't believe there to be much new here, but it serves as a timely reminder of the importance of biodiversity and our collective action required to enhance and promote it. I note you mentioned the benefit of people, planet and nature, which I applaud. Too often it seems as though mankind is the problem and plays no part in its biodiversity of our planet. It is for that reason we need to be pragmatic and proportionate, yet move with pace in our actions to ensure we have a thriving natural environment. In saying that, I hope the overwhelming support of this motion, which I'm sure there will be, is not misinterpreted as a carte blanche license to push through without proper scrutiny any policy you feel fits the outline brief. It is still vital that council members, stakeholders and the public get the right opportunity to ask questions and challenge policy proposals in a timely manner before decisions are taken by Cabinet. In that way, we have the best opportunity to work together to achieve the best possible outcomes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Warwick, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder for bringing this motion. I'm in support of it as well. I know you, as you alluded to, there's going to be a lot more detail behind the points that you can sort of briefly cover in a few lines on a motion. And I just wanted to speak to Resolution 7, the health and well-being of our rivers, and indeed our oceans are super important and crucial to our survival. They're critical in regulating global climate, absorbing CO2 emissions and reducing excessive heat in the environment. I'm aware that the Winchester district only has a very few metres of tidal coastline, and there's a prize for those of you who know where that is. However, some of our coastal towns across Hampshire are witnessing serious impact firsthand. Poor water quality has impacted safe bathing and seafood. Our beaches are littered with debris, much of it plastic, and recent studies have shown that marine microplastics have infiltrated various marine environments and many species of fish. So I support this motion, as I say, and I hope perhaps there are a few more actions that this council could take in the future, including writing to our water companies, asking them to support the important South Coast kelp bed recovery programme to support carbon capture and the recovery of our fish stocks and population, to include river recovery and water conservation in your climate change action plan, to support water conservation through local planning decisions, initiatives including education and awareness, collection of grey water, encouraging installation of community water butts, and ensure water efficient fixtures in all our city council buildings. Please support our government's recent initiative to use money from fines from water pollution to benefit the natural environment and to tackle river pollution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Lee referred to reducing the decline in the natural environment. I'm expecting this council to reverse that decline, and we'll be holding the council to account on that basis. I am concerned that we've had a series of knee-jerk reactions and decommitments from Her Majesty's government on environmental matters, and I do think that will be an impediment. So I would wish to add a little to our commitment in this motion, which is to communicate with our MPs and other local authorities to share our aims in this matter, and given the likely proximity of a general election, also parliamentary candidates for whenever it may be. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Power. Councillor Pett, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome this nature emergency motion and strongly support it. In my role as the Council's appointed member of the South Downs National Park Authority, I'd ask that members note that the policy line is entirely congruent with the first purpose of the South Downs National Park, in fact, first purpose of all national parks in England, that being, and I quote, to conserve and enhance the natural beauty, wildlife and cultural heritage of the area. I will use my role to ensure the greatest synergy is exploited between this council and the park in its work to mitigate the nature emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. Councillor Pearson, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I also support this motion. I think it's appropriate, should come forward now, and indeed more than just this once, and I'm sure Councillor Lerney will repeat this message time and time again until the thick heads actually begin to take note. There are plenty of examples through history how human activities have destroyed the environment, but we've never had, back in history or prehistory, since before 1850, such a rapid change in climate and a rapid impact on our environment. And it is, behold us, we've learned through space travel, you play around with the atmosphere inside a spaceship, then you have problems for the crew. I was brought up at the time when Spaceship Earth was very much the idea, and the demand from that green lungs. And this is what this is about, biodiversity, green lungs. When we're building houses, and we need these houses because we've got a huge and expanding population, we need to bear in mind there have to be green lungs, there has to be biodiversity within our housing areas, and indeed in the countryside, bearing in mind that the countryside is also an industrial area producing 65% of our food. I regret it's not 100% of our food, because the difference, of course, adds to carbon miles, and we're not in favour of that either. So thank you very much for bringing this motion forward, Councillor Lerney. I'm delighted to be able to support it, and I hope we can all get together and really make every effort to do something about it and encourage others to take part for themselves. It's not a question of leaving for somebody else to do. As Councillor Todd quite sensibly said earlier on, there are times when we've got to stand up and do something for ourselves, and this is one of these occasions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Godfrey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would not wish the council to support a motion that may be based on a false premise, but you should remember that 96% of all known species are now extinct. While we can't deal with what happened in previous millennia, we do need to address what is the problem, the challenges in front of us. I do support this motion. We all ought to. I would be much stronger in my support if a couple of changes were made to it, that it was more Winchester-centric, that rather than we are experiencing a nature emergency, it was Winchester is experiencing a nature emergency, because we represent the people of Winchester, not our own personal interests. We also need to consider in our policies the impact on the nature in Winchester, not everywhere. And so our policies must reflect what is needed locally. With that expectation, I would firmly support this motion. And I hope the administration will also support it, because at the moment, their proposal is to build on the countryside far more than is absolutely necessary, destroying habitats, destroying the biodiversity which this motion claims to support. This council should support this motion and do it properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Tippett-Cooper?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, of course, support this motion. Having two very small children draws into sharp focus the absolute necessity that every single authority everywhere pulls whatever lever they have in their possession to attempt to reverse the alarming depletion of nature in the UK. The depletion of the UK's biodiversity in the last 30 years since I was a child is absolutely terrifying. 60% of the UK's insect population has disappeared in just 20 years. 30% of UK bird species are currently threatened with extinction now, and more than 1 in 7 native species face extinction, and more than 40% of species are in decline. And in terms of the practical impact of this motion, it will inject impetus and focus on nature's recovery into every single relevant decision that we make as a council. Now, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust manage the excellent Winnall Nature Reserve, which is in my ward in St Bartholomew, and they say, we need to turn things around for nature and climate through strong and bold leadership from our political representatives. Councils have an enormous impact in your local community and could act to put local nature in recovery. And this motion is strong and bold leadership from this council, and indeed requires strong and bold leadership from all of us members here today to try and prevent nature's alarming decline for the benefit of my children's generation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Porter?
Thank you, and I'm sure I wouldn't be able to beat Councillor Tippett-Cooper's speech, but I was going to be speaking on a very similar thing. I'm really supportive of the improving doorstep access to nature, particularly to those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Only by experiencing nature for ourselves can we learn to love it and to treasure it. And I was, like you, but a different generation. My grandmother was born in 1880, and my daughter's children are likely to last to the years 2100. And we tend to think in the limits of our own 4-year or 8-year or 12-year period as a council. But actually, if we think of the hundreds of years, we have a good chance of making a difference if we all learn to love nature right on our own doorstep first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Reach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this motion, as I'm pleased we hear right across the chamber that colleagues here do. So isn't it an absolute outrage and a crying shame. Today, the Prime Minister announced a 5-year delay in the ban of the sale of petrol and diesel cars, a 9-year delay in the ban on fossil fuel heating for off-gas homes, and scrapping the requirement for landlords to ensure all rental properties have an energy performance certificate of grade C or higher. While we here recognise the urgency and the emergency we all face, I'll reiterate, I find it a disgrace that the Prime Minister thinks this is something that we can kick in the long grass. So I'll reiterate, I wholeheartedly support this motion, and I hope everyone else will. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. Councillor Prest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also echo Councillor Reid's comments, and I wholeheartedly support this motion. But as a new councillor, as someone who represents people for the first time, and also as the father of 4 not so small children, they're all taller than I am, I just wanted to point out something as we sit here as a group of people in this room, that behind the very welcome nature emergency and the ongoing climate emergency sits a human emergency. And really, it's been said by people wiser than me that the planet will keep on turning long after we are gone. But when it comes to this, you know, we have spoken a lot tonight about housing for people to live in, and I've been in committees in the short time that I've been on the council that have focused very hard on that. This motion, it strikes me, is about providing a healthy, natural environment for our people to live in. And the climate emergency, which precedes it, is about ensuring that our people are able to live on our planet for many, many years to come. So I welcome a nature emergency. I support, of course, a climate emergency, but I would like to just add a human emergency that we're obviously not here to approve tonight, but I think sits behind everything that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more for debate, councillors? Councillor Brophy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to pick up on, I think, a very important point made by Councillor Lee, well, of course, approving the motion. Councillor Lee pointed out that we should go further and look at the wider impacts, the procurement and supply chain impacts that we have. I noted that Councillor Godfrey said this should be about Winchester's impacts and biodiversity on our doorstep, but I think the key point is, just as in the way that the water flowing through Winchester Moors goes both upstream and downstream, we have to consider the impacts that we have beyond Winchester itself. The importance should not be just on biodiversity in our area, but we should also consider the wider impacts across Hampshire as well. That means that where sometimes it may not be appropriate for us to always think about preserving ourselves first, we have to think about the wider consequences of what we do. So I think valuing biodiversity should be very important and prioritised, but not to the exclusion of the wider impacts that we have across Hampshire, for example.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brophy. I think that concludes debate, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll now close the debate of Councillor Loney's motion and ask her now to exercise her right to reply to debate. Councillor Loney.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I really appreciate the support that we've heard from across the House. I am very with Councillor Bolton on the pragmatic and proportionate approach we need to take to this. As a council, we have a lot of responsibilities. We've emphasised the need for action on the climate emergency, and it's important that we balance out all of the things that we have to do as a council. In terms of our borders, nature isn't very good at recognising borders. Not very many birds, for example, would spend their entire lives just within the boundaries of Winchester. I very much welcomed the government giving responsibility to the county council for the local nature recovery strategy, not only for the area covered by Hampshire, but also for Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight, which I think was actually a good government decision because it shows the recognition that we need to do these things over very wide areas and not think too parochially about this. I have consulted the leader and he is happy to write to our MPs or whoever else is appropriate to talk about this agenda and say what this council is doing. So Councillor Power can be happy. I do recognise that it does say we, and that is very much the royal we, I am afraid. It's fairly standard for council motions to talk about we, by which, of course, we mean the council. New development was mentioned, and it is very important that new development does recognise the need to improve biodiversity. We're moving in that direction with biodiversity net gain. Those of you who have been on the Kings Barton Forum for a number of years will remember we actually had a presentation from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust to talk about how much the biodiversity of that area had improved since construction started and land was actually put aside for nature recovery. So potentially development can benefit biodiversity as long as we keep pushing developers in that direction and making sure they meet those commitments. So, as I say, thank you everybody for your support, and I certainly hope that we'll have unanimous approval this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. So, members, may I ask regarding Councillor Lerney's motion this evening, all those in support, please? I will ask, though. Anyone against? Any member abstaining? No? Thank you so much. Is agreed. Thank you once again, Councillor Lerney. Sets out the second motion of this evening, which is to be moved by Councillor Wallace. Councillor Wallace, do you have a seconder for the motion, please?
Yes, myself. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, thank you so much. And do you wish to reserve your right to speak, sir? Councillor Lee? Yes? Thank you. Wallace, would you present your motion, please? And may I remind you that you have a maximum of 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Every single river in our district, in fact every river in England, fails to meet chemical standards. In our precious chalk streams and rivers, this pollution can lead to excessive algal growth, which can smother the plants and decrease oxygen availability at spawning gravels used by salmon and trout, effectively killing off both the plants and animals that live in our waterways. Where these waterways enter the sea at the Solent, the high input levels of nitrogen and phosphorus from wastewater, urban runoff and agricultural discharges have caused eutrophication, resulting in overabundance of algae. These algal growths form dense mats that frequently cover the Solent's mudflats, preventing oxygen from reaching the animals in the sediment and causing mass mortality, especially in hot weather. Fixing these problems requires reducing the chemical contamination that enters our rivers. The contaminants come from multiple sources, the main ones being agriculture, the water industry, and urban development, which is exacerbated by runoff from roads and other infrastructure. The current system for managing these contaminants falls to a messy mix of multiple organisations. Ofwat regulate water, the Environment Agency is responsible for flood defence, local government and planning authorities for houses, and the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs for farming. This siloed approach creates further problems and hampers progress on resolving the key issues. It would be far better to have a single regulator responsible for a catchment area. Nevertheless, while this is the system, we must work within it to protect our rivers and waterways. Nutrient neutrality rules were put in place in 2017 to mitigate the impact of developments on our waterways. The rules prevent local authorities giving the go-ahead to new developments that are projected to add nutrients such as phosphates and nitrates to rivers, either through wastewater from new homes or runoff from building sites. Michael Gove's plan was to remove these nutrient neutrality rules. Whilst the government is correct in stating that the nutrient neutrality rules on their own will not solve the nutrient problem, they ignore the point that it would undoubtedly help. It makes no sense to dealing with our already damaged rivers and waterways by watering down regulations and adding even more pollution. Moreover, the idea that it's a choice between looking after our environment and building more houses is simply wrong. With the right investment and appropriate regulation of all sources of pollution to our waterways, communities can have both high-quality, affordable homes and healthy waterways. It was therefore welcome news that the proposed changes were rejected by a cross-party group at the House of Lords last week. To quote one of those rejecting the proposal, the former Conservative Environment Minister, 83-year-old Lord Debon, "It was one of the worst pieces of legislation I have ever seen, and I've been around a long time." However, the rejection by the House of Lords that happened since this motion was originally submitted means that a motion to Winchester Council is no longer needed at this time. Therefore, Madam Mayor, I ask that the motion be withdrawn from the council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Lee, though, I think is that?
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor, if I can just help out. So a motion or a motion or an amendment may be withdrawn. So we're asking, and we've just heard a request to withdraw that motion from Councillor Wallace. It can be withdrawn by the mover himself, but we need consent of the seconder as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans. Yes, Councillor Lee, I was just going to ask you, sir, do we have your consent or?
Yes, you have my consent, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you once again, Councillor Wallace, appreciated. So there will be no debate, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm going to move on to, excuse me. Yes, next item of business this evening is agenda item 8, changes to committee memberships. Mrs. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I skipped on a few pages before I caught up with you. Yes, I have been notified of the following changes to memberships of committees. For Business and Housing Policy Committee, Councillor Scott is to be replaced by Councillor Powell. That's the change that I have to report to Council this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans. So we move on to agenda item 9, which is questions from members of the council. All members should have copies of the questions and answers which were circulated electronically prior to the meeting and also available on the council's website. A reminder that our procedure is that only the questionnaire is able to ask one supplementary question and should indicate accordingly. Members are reminded that our procedure rules allow a total time occupied by questions and the answer and the supplementary and shall not exceed 30 minutes. In order to maximise the opportunity for questions to be answered, please may I ask that supplementary questions are succinct and to the point, please. Thank you. So I will move to question number 1, Councillor Isaacs. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for your response. My supplementary question is such. Would the council not agree that if the current policy has been in place for the past 20 years, it's about time for a change? With the cost of living crisis and the unfair bin policy places a disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups. Environmental consequences if residents can't replace the broken bin broken at collection where residents are told that it's a wear and tear issue, even though from their house it was perfectly okay. If the resident cannot provide this problem or fix this issue, I've emailed from residents that the cost that's quoted within your response is actually different and a lot higher in emails and questions and comments from residents. So can I just confirm once again that that is the definite price that residents should be paying, and that can we agree, or would you, the council please agree to potentially review the policy?
Thank you. Councillor Loney.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Isaacs. We always regularly look at policy, but this does have to be taken in the context of available budget. To replace our bins as we currently have them every 10 years, you're looking at a cost of somewhere between £200,000 and £300,000 a year. And that is for something which is a non-statutory duty. We have a requirement to pick up the bins, but we specify the kind of receptacles that members of the public need to put their rubbish in. We do not have to provide them. So this is a difficult subject. Where I am happy for us to have a look is to ensure that we are dealing with the less well-off members of our community as far as the bins go. And we will have a look at having at what concessions we might be able to make in line with those concessions that we make for our brown bin system. I would also say that in terms of bins, one of the things that may have been missed in the government announcement today was the announcement that they were not going forward with the consistency rules that we were expecting to come in to standardise forms of collection across the country. This has left us in somewhat of a quandary in terms of where we're going forward with bin collection, and I imagine it has also put the county council in somewhat of a quandary about whether they are capable of now going forward with their new MRF, which we were relying on in order to be able to expand the plastics that we could recycle. So this is an area which we will review, and we will have a look at what we can do. And of course, there is the potential to look at the budget for that.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Isaacs? Okay, thank you. Question 2, Councillor Laming. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the portfolio holder for giving me a fairly comprehensive reply on this. But people are worried about seeing other councils getting into trouble and potentially getting into trouble on various points. I would like some assurance that we've been down all these roads to make sure that we are covered on all these particular points.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Councillor Laming. The problem of local authority finances has been running for many a year, and the baseline problem for everybody is 13 years of cuts. And that has certainly reduced delivery of services across the country, but it's clearly reduced the resilience of councils, and a lot are very fragile because of that. On top of that, which of course is something that we've suffered for the same as other councils, unitaries and tier 1 authorities have the additional problem of adult social care, which has sort of increased the fragility of those councils, which is one of the reasons why Hampshire County Council is beginning to reach the stage of looking very fragile. But this reduced resilience caused by that general reduction in funding has just made some councils far more fragile with other factors. So you have a situation like in Birmingham or in Glasgow where the equal pay claim just tips them over the edge. I mean, it's so huge. I can guarantee that's one thing that we don't have a fear
about. I mean, the other big policies, big factors, I suppose, with so many councils getting into trouble was the Conservative policy of encouraging councils to look for other sources of income, a so-called entrepreneurial approach, which those who've been on the council for a while will remember me being very critical of several years ago, to look at other methods of producing additional income. And what the government did was allow no questions asked borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board. In some cases, this took the form of housing developments companies, not housing companies of our type, but housing companies that build. For example, Brick by Brick at Croydon, which the failure of that company precipitated that authority's collapse, or the energy companies that Nottingham and Bristol also lost a lot of money on. But the biggest failure that's tipped many councils over the edge has been massive investment in commercial property, often outside the authority boundaries. In many cases, it's been reckless. I mean, Woking as an authority has similar turnover to us, but I think has borrowings of over £1 billion. And just servicing that makes it impossible for these councils to manage. Now, thankfully, despite it being the aspiration of the previous administration through the SAP scheme, Winchester City Council didn't get into this frenzy. But the opposition urged us to continue that process and to devise stuff in the early stages of this administration, but thankfully we didn't. So to sum up, the council doesn't really face any of those particular risks created by these highly risky investments, but the huge baseline cuts continue to create a challenge to us, which we have in hand through the TC25 programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Question 3, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you for the sorry.
Yeah, carry on. Start again, Councillor Wallace. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answer. It's good to see that the council recognises the contradiction between increasing traffic and the council's carbon goals. Per your response, my understanding is that the council's focused on mitigation for the additional greenhouse gases that were reduced at the junction. Given that forecasts show that the changes proposed at the junction will significantly increase traffic travelling past Winchester, in particular heavy goods vehicles, what mitigation measures did the council have in mind? I'm struggling to understand the mitigation for thousands of additional lorries. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, and I assure you I was at all of those meetings, and it remains very clearly a statement in red that we don't agree on all of those points that you mentioned. The mitigation that we were seeking was slower speeds through the route, so that the traffic was travelling at something that was more efficient in terms of energy. We've been seeking alternative methods of generating energy along the sides of the route and in line with a design code that would be local. And we've been seeking many other items as well, which I could go into detail, but our carbon expert, Anna Wise, was at the meetings too, and she is always present at those meetings, and we had a number of other opportunities that we wanted to explore. None of these have been considered by National Highways, unfortunately. It is a series of meetings in public where we argue the case for reduced carbon, but it's against a national carbon budget for roads, and it's considered to be a minor amount for our particular junction. We are always arguing, and will continue to argue, that actually, just as we talked about animals not being crossing borders, so does carbon and so do greenhouse gases, and we will continue to do that right to the last day.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Tippett Cooper, question 4. Councillor Becker's obviously not here this evening, sir. So if you have anything else and anyone else can answer.
I'll make it an easy one, Madam Mayor. No, I to take the opportunity just, particularly while the Chief Executive is here in front of Cabinet as well, to say a massive thank you and commend the hard work of the Ukraine resettlement team on Winchester City Council. Every single one of those 171 households that have been supported into alternative accommodation or elsewhere comes with a vast amount of work, I know, and so I just wanted to put that on the record. And also, the question I was going to ask Councillor Becker was about the success of the integration fund, individual integration fund, which I'm aware has been hugely successful, an innovative approach where the council is offering small grants to Ukrainian individuals to help them move on in terms of work opportunities or education opportunities. I just wanted to ask how that was going and whether that was successful, but I understand that it is, but I can pass over to the leader if he wants to pick that up.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Tippett Cooper. Yes, my understanding from having spoken to Councillor Becker is that that particular fund is going very well, and I'm so pleased that you've thanked the officers for their work. We had a chance recently to thank and celebrate the host families that had welcomed people to this district. I remember at the start of the crisis, just over a year ago now, a lot of us stood in Abbey Gardens and we all said, Winchester stands with Ukraine. But it was ultimately, it was the host families that really stood with Ukraine. They were the people who threw their lives up in the air to a degree in order to support people and frankly took on something that they really didn't know what they were being asked to take on. The work they did went far beyond anything that they could have known they were taking on in advance. And we owe an enormous debt to the families and to the people, the hosts that took people on. But I would also like to thank the team that came together at Winchester City Council at short notice and absolutely took on the challenge with enthusiasm and passion and compassion for the Ukrainian families and for their hosts. And what I also really appreciate about their work is precisely the fact that they've been sensitive to the way that situations have changed, that time has passed, and we need to help people into the next stage of how we support them during this, the awful period that is happening to the country of Ukraine. So there's a lot of people we need to thank. We're very grateful to all of them. This new fund does appear to be meeting a need, and I will ask Councillor Becker when she's better to circulate some details. She is actually watching us at the moment on YouTube from her sick bed and has sent me a note, so I can actually tell you what her answer would have been. She says, the initial response for the fund has been overwhelming. To date, we have received 80 applications, out of which we have processed 44 and recently approved 32. So that is a really very strong response. We're very grateful to the families. We're very grateful to the officers. We're grateful for the contribution that the Ukrainian people are making to our community. And thank you for giving me the chance to celebrate that work in front of everybody here tonight, because I know we all collectively are very grateful for everything that's been done.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Question 5, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Lerney for the reply. I must say I'm quite concerned. Is the council really happy to see our services to residents to continue to contribute to the toxic soup of chemicals in the environment with the use of potentially 12 classified carcinogenic chemicals, 9 endocrine disrupting chemicals, 8 development and reproductive toxins, 2 cholinesterase inhibitors, which reduce the ability of nerve cells to pass information, and then also the impact on pets, plants, trees, and wildlife. There are 36 pesticides that can be used in the UK, but are not allowed to be used in the EU. And if 96 other councils can review and change or ban use of chemicals in our local environment, why can't Winchester do that? Thank you.
Councillor Loney.
Thank you. I think this comes back to Councillor Bolton's comment earlier around pragmatic and proportionate approaches to how we manage these and how we tackle both the climate and nature emergencies. Prior to Councillor Lee's question, I had explored this with the natural environment team, and subject to keeping use to a minimum, and as described in my answer, they are relatively relaxed about the current use of glyphosate, while always looking at what other councils are doing. We do avoid the use of chemicals on our grass pitches as much as we possibly can. There are sometimes some problems where that is the only way to tackle it, but we use biological controls, grass cutting regimes which help control a lot of weeds and so on as much as possible. We do have this constantly under review, and we do look at what other councils are doing. Currently, the alternatives are expensive and less effective. I don't want to get us in a situation as Brighton did, where they were reliant on migrant labour to actually pick weeds out of the pavements, and when they couldn't get the labour, offered old ladies tools so they could get out of their front doors. I think we do have to be careful about managing this in an effective way. As I said, we will, however, hold this constantly under review, and where more effective methods come forward, we'll definitely have a look at that.
Thank you. Question 6, Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder for her answer. As you know, it's been 10 years since Bushfield Camp was included in the current local plan, and more than 50 years since the site was occupied. And I appreciate the City Council doesn't own this site, it's owned by the church commissioners. But can the portfolio holder reassure our residents that through the local planning process, there will be no conflict with other economic sites in the Winchester district if this site is in fact developed, sites such as Winnell, for example, nor will there be conflict with our local universities should a university from outside of our area, and potentially well outside of our area, comes to develop on that site. Thank you.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Well, you saw from the original answer that this is in the local plan, and the developer believes it's a developable site. And they have a job of finding the economic value out of that site, as well as the biodiversity value, which you've raised in your first question. So they do have to find the appropriate companies and organisations that wish to be there. And in general, those people will also have access to other sites in the city of Winchester or in any other city that they wish to look at. And it is the job of the developer to make it more attractive to the developer, to the company or the organisation than any other site that organisation considers. For that reason, we have actually maintained Winnell as part of our economic development area, because the variety of offers that we can make means that more and more companies will think that Winchester is the right place to come. And we want to provide jobs for our own residents so that they're not commuting for a long distance. And the variety of jobs is what gives our residents that opportunity to be living within 15 minutes or so of their own job, which is the ideal. And so the variety of having the different sites around Winchester and across the whole district, which includes Whiteley and Segundsworth, is really important, because it does give that opportunity for the public to make their own choice about where they work, and but for the companies to make their own choice about where they actually have their employees. Second point you raised, can you just remind me? The economic case. Yeah. So Right. Again, the economic case is to be made by the developer, because if they want to go ahead with it, they will have to make that economic case. Should another university come in, I'm sure that the opportunity within the planning system is there for that to be explored. It's not for us to be making that statement. I think the master plan, the concept master plan, very clearly sets out what we should be having on that site. If that conversation starts to develop, I'm sure that will be part of the planning process and the detailed master plan process.
Thank you. Question 7, Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Lurney, for the partial response. You asked why the DEFRA report would want to publish league table. In fact, you should challenge the fact it did. Well, it didn't. You're quite right. It issued 10 years of fact about the increasingly poor performance of this council in dealing with fly tipping. At the beginning of that period, there are 614 incidents of fly tipping in this district. When the last year, in 1819, the last year of Conservative administration, there were 770 incidents in that year. And in this the last year of this DEFRA report, there were 1,732 incidents, more than doubled under this administration. In comparison with the best performing non-metropolitan district council, Rushcliffe, Conservative controlled, which had 1,032 incidents of fly tipping in that last year, they issued 755 fixed penalty notices. We issued 1. Why are you allowing fly tipping to run out of control and not using all the levers available to suppress this scourge of our beautiful district?
Councillor Lurney.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Clearly, while I accept that we haven't given you all the detail that you asked for in your question, there is a limited amount of time to prepare for questions, and we can supply all that data that you asked for separately. We do constantly review what we're doing with fly tipping. There has been a national picture of increased fly tipping, and of course this hasn't been helped by the decision of organisations such as the County Council to charge for much of what people think of as being household waste, particularly when it's been created by them themselves doing work in their houses. We constantly look at this, but we are concentrating on prosecutions because we do want to give those people committing fly tipping offences a punch in the gut rather than the minor slap on the wrist that's represented by a fixed penalty notice. You talked about the table and the authorities in there, many of which were, of course, very urban authorities. Most of the notices were being given for very minor offences, like, leaving sofas and things outside in back alleys and so on, which are much easier to deal with. We do look at the performance of other authorities. You mentioned Rushcliffe, which last year issued a total of £0 of fines. So I would question whether their performance is connected to local factors or whether it's actually connected to their planning enforcement. But we're very happy to look at that.
Thank you. Question 8, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the leader for a very full and comprehensive answer. I don't have any supplementary, but hopefully the new signage will go some way to address the matter and to reduce the confusion of our travelling public. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Question 9, Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder for her response. With the recent announcement from the Secretary of State on the 8th of September, what will be the administration's direction of travel? What will they do differently to meet the new guidance on building more homes in the right places, the local plan, and planning capacity and capability, please?
Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. As you will see from the answer you've got, this question has been explored in Cabinet, and at the moment we have received advice that we keep going with the amount of houses that we are aiming to build on from our own annual figure. This figure has been explored over the years, and it has gone up and down by 20 or 30, but we estimate that over the 20 years of a plan, that equates to 14,500 properties. We do believe that we are able to continue with the current plan at that number. It includes a buffer against which we can then make sure that if any developments don't happen, for some reason, we have enough of a buffer. We do have to explore that buffer to make sure it's resilient. And we also talked about the amount of 5-year housing supply that we have, that we feel confident about. Our current 23 to 28 housing supply is 5.6 years, based on the amount of houses we've been building so far in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, the last 3 years. In 2021, we had 874, 21 to 22, 1,201, 22 to 23, 1,000. So we don't believe, we also have to be cognizant of the additional housing that may be required in the push area, and we are struggling to address that because those districts themselves haven't decided yet how much housing they need and how much we would be required to contribute. And we are having conversations with them in order to try and make sure that we are at least having a duty to cooperate. And a duty to cooperate does not mean we have to cooperate, but we are then aware of what their needs are. So for the moment, our number remains the same, and we don't have a need to supply more. We do have a need to make sure that we satisfy the nutrient neutrality issues. And as we've explored earlier in this meeting today, that is a challenge for us all. And the recent failure in government of the announcement about nutrient neutrality has really just put another spanner in the works for us, which is very unfortunate, which is why we're going to continue as we are. I hope that helps your question.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think I've got time for one more. Councillor Bolton, please. Question 10.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Todd, for your response. And thank you in advance to Councillor Pett, because he's got a lot of work on his hands, I think, there. Does the leader agree that the South Downs National Park Authority should be urged to consider a root and branch overhaul of its governance and how it communicates and exercises adequately its duty to consult, in particular with district councillors throughout the park? After all, we are the elected representatives of the residents. And would he agree to write to the chairperson of the South Downs National Park Authority Board to that effect on behalf of Winchester Council? I thank you.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Bolton. To quote the it's flashing, it's very exciting. To quote the 7 Habits of Effective People, I think this might be one where the first step is to seek first to understand and then to be understood. My understanding is that the new chair of the South Downs National Park is already actively thinking about how there can be much better engagement with district councils and other authorities within the South Downs National Park area. I absolutely share your intent of wanting us to have stronger links in terms of how the South Downs National Park works, understanding its impact on our area, working collaboratively and bringing all the expertise of our different councillors to bear in terms of how it operates. I know that that's something that Councillor Pett is determined to advocate on our behalf, but I also know that to a large degree we're pushing it an open door, and that when, for example, I had a meeting with the new chair of the national park, she was very clear. Her immediate response was to say, is it possible to have either a member briefing or a session at your full council where there is a report back on the work of the park? What can we do to strengthen those limits? So I don't think there's a need for me to write and express that intention. I think we're pushing it an open door. And one of the reasons I'm looking forward to Councillor Pett's member briefing is so that we can hear more about these initiatives and how we can work with the South Downs National Park to make sure that the voices of people within the Winchester district living in the South Downs National Park area and their representatives are properly heard within the deliberations of the park.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. And members, that concludes questions for this evening. And the final item of business this evening is just to formally note the exempt appendices to report CL 168. Members, is that agreed? Thank you very much. So that concludes the formal business for this evening. And please may I ask officers to end the broadcast. Thank you.